Uh-oh.
Wait, how did you do that much damage? Your bow. Dude, these guys have like negative crit resist. Bo This is sad. Look at their health.
Oh, that was rough. That was rough.
Dude, you killed that first dude with like 2 light attack poison injects.
Oh my gosh.
Hey everyone, my name is Grim, and I'm excited to finally be sharing my build video with you for the Elsweyr patch. Welcome to the new meta. This has been a very weird patch so far, and I guess it'll continue to be because nothing's changing for a while. But I guess let's talk about the changes first and what problems those have brought up. If you're new, welcome to the show. This is kind of crazy. Let's just talk about abilities first, because a few things have changed pretty dramatically. First of all, the real new meta is heavy armor. So many things have happened to make like sword and board heavy armor Nightblades ridiculously powerful. The first one is Phantasmal Escape. This morph now removes all snares. It's basically just a better version of Shuffle that Nightblades can use even if they're heavy armor. So you get basically a medium armor ability that you used to only be able to use as a medium armor person. Now Nightblades can run heavy armor and really have no drawbacks even open world. Reaper's Mark is now suddenly valuable because we don't have any other way to get Fracture from within our kit. And it's free, so that's kind of nice. So Reaper's Mark, great way to go. I think I do like it better than Piercing because the invisibility, pulling people out of invisibility for such a short amount of time, 5 seconds just isn't that long. I don't really care for it. I'm not going to reapply it every 5 seconds to keep someone out of stealth. It's just not worth it to me. So Reaper's Mark is kind of the way to go. The healing is really nice too. The heal's really fat. Major Berserk is fine. It's great. Anyways, I guess it doesn't really matter which one you do, but it's nice. It's free now, and it's worth using. The big change, really, I think, is for Relentless Focus. This used to give you Minor Berserk, and now, instead of giving you damage, your highest damage burst is actually going to give you some of the best defense in the entire game, which is so weird. It just seems like it should be so against the design concept of what a Nightblade is and should be, and Well, I don't know. It frustrates me. It frustrates me. It really does. And not because I don't like it. It's very strong. This change is not bad. It's not objectively bad. It just isn't a fun change. I think people are frustrated more than ever fighting Nightblades because you can be a heavy armor, sword and board Nightblade, and just destroy it. You can just be invincible. You can have high health, high damage, ridiculous like resistance, really high healing through things like Shadow Cloak. It's just not fun to fight. It's not fun to fight. And it's not fun for me either because I lost a lot of my damage for this so that we could have ridiculously invincible sword and board dueling builds. It's just frustrating to me. But that's fine. That's fine. It is what it is. Now, instead of playing around really high damage, we have to build around the fact that we have a lot of passive defense through this, because if you're running Relentless, which is great, you'll probably be running Relentless because it's still one of the better abilities in our kit and one of the main ways that you're going to do like a burst combo. It's gonna be weird. Oh yeah, it also gives you a huge heal now if you hit someone that's in melee range with it. Like, so if you fire it from melee range, you get a really big heal, and that is also kind of crazy to me. Because it makes Nightblade so tanky for no reason, and also neuters their damage. So weird. It's just weird. Okay, shadow abilities. Surprise attack no longer gives us fracture. Instead, if you hit them from behind, you shred through a small portion of their armor, reducing their physical resistance by 5% for 10 seconds. That's fine. That's not so bad. It's just not great. I would much rather it. I mean, okay, granted, having fracture was OP in a lot of ways, but you could purge it. It didn't stack with anything. This is not bad. And I do like that it plays into the idea, the theme of being a Nightblade, hitting someone from behind shreds a portion of their armor. That's kind of cool. I feel like it would have been cooler if it was just major fracture, and if you hit them from behind, you cause major fracture for 10 seconds. Because then, you know, it can't stack. You can't be fractured twice. But then I guess what would you do with that other ability that would be worthless without... Anyways, I'm not bitter. Cloak, not much has changed here. I think it lasts longer, apparently. Someone told me it lasts longer. It doesn't look like it lasts longer. Maybe it was 2.8 seconds before, now it's 3. Something insignificant like that. I don't know. A Manifestation of Terror, Mass Hysteria is the one that I use. To me, this got a huge nerf. This is actually... I'm sorry. To me, this got a huge buff. It's a nerf to a lot of people, but it's a buff for me. And here's why. It used to be that Mass Hysteria feared 6 people and then snared them when the effect ended, which was so strong. Oh yeah, and maimed them, so they did less damage, which is just like, it's obscenely strong. It's so strong. So that got nerfed. It does everything else, but now it only affects 2 people. Well, great. Now it's still equally OP in duels, and it's significantly reduced in open world. Like, its effectiveness just tanked. So it's great for abusing people one-on-one, not great for 1vxers. I care more about, you know, the 1vxer side of combat, which, you know, not everyone does and not everyone has to, but whatever. Now, they've taken away those other effects. It no longer maims, and it no longer, like, snares at the end of it. So instead, it terrifies up to 6 people, which is great. I love this change. It makes it better for people who are outnumbered, and it makes it worse for people who are, like, just... like 10 people chasing down one guy, or one guy abusing it in a 1v1 fight. It's just a lot more balanced, and I like that. I like that a lot. Let's see. Shadow Image is still broken, so I don't really use it. I've been trying out Dark Shade because it's kind of fun. I wish that would get fixed, but it is what it is. I don't really use anything here because this is all Magicka, right? But Leeching Strikes is as good as ever. So I still use Leeching Strikes sometimes. I switch it out for different things, but that's my flex spot, is Leeching Strikes. So that's great. So how do I build around this? A few other things have changed that are going to affect my builds. First of all, the food's got nerfed. So my old favorite food, which was Artaeum Takeaway Broth, has been nerfed along with Dubious. In fact, all I guess they're, well, food or drink, but ones that increase both max stats and recoveries have had the max stat portion of their contribution to your stat pool cut. So what did this actually mean? In effect, this meant that my health was just way too low. It was really hard to get it to an acceptable place. With Artaeum Takeaway Broth, my unbuffed health was at 17.7. And when I say unbuffed, I mean not in Cyrodiil. So that is just not very great. It's low, and keep in mind, at that point, I was already running all Triglyphs. So there's not an efficient way to get more health at that point. You're just kind of stuck at a very low health pool, and being in Cyrodiil, relying on something like Troll King, which scales directly off of the amount of max health you have, while everyone else is running around with like an easy high health pool, it just isn't very effective. So I needed to find a way to build health back in. The other option, of course, in terms of like efficient sets is going to be Lavafoot, Soup, and Saltress. You get a big like little poop of stamina and a good amount of stamina recovery as well. The stat distribution is decent. The problem is, once again, the health. There's just not a good way to get health with this. You can, I guess, put health glyphs on your armor, but then you're just losing so much magicka. And without that magicka, it's going to be really hard to survive open world because you rely on things like cloak and fear to even the odds when you're outnumbered. So that wasn't a great option because it was either going to negatively affect both my health and my magicka. It brought my health down to like 13k, which was just not good. It was not good. So I cut that option out. It's not good. That left me with one choice, and it was the one that I went with, and that is Tri-Stat Food. Tri-Stat Food is brilliant, really. In terms of the stat pool it gives you, it is second only to Artaeum Takeaway Broth. But if you consider the fact that Artaeum Takeaway Broth has a great stat pool because it gives you health recovery, which in my opinion is probably the least important of any stat possible. Stam recovery, magicka recovery, max stam, max health, max magicka, all more important than health recovery. Health recovery isn't bad. It's nice to have. But if you were to take the health recovery out of Artaeum, there's no argument that Withered Tree is just a lot thicker stat-wise. It was also the only food that was getting me to a respectable health level, and at the same time, it boosted my magicka a ton. This is better than ever, because the only ability that changed a lot that I didn't talk about was Incapacitating Strike. Gosh, what were they thinking? So many things wrong with this. And I'm only going to critique it because I have a solution to it. I have a suggestion. But so in the PTS stage, they decided to take away a lot of Incap's potency. And they did this by taking away the stun and the defile. Fine, I guess. That's sure. So be it. But that was such a hard neuter. People complained and they decided, okay, we want it to still be incapacitating. So let's put a silence on it. A 3-second silence that prevents people from using any magicka at all for 3 seconds. What? That's so, it was so much stronger than the thing that they took away in the first place. So they're looking to nerf it. They nerf it too much, and then they buff it to oblivion. It's just so strong. It's impossible to fight against any magicka class, disproportionately disadvantaged. And stamina classes are going to have a hard time too, because you can't stealth if you're stamina. There are a lot of magicka abilities that are still useful no matter what class you are, but it really targets magicka builds, especially in a 1v1, and it's just frustrating and it's not really fun. So they're like, okay, well, great. We have a solution. We'll make it breakable. So it works like any other stun, except that it doesn't really stun you. It just stops you from using magicka, and then you break it. You get CC immunity for nothing. It's so bad. It's now the worst stun in the game. So now the best way to use Incap is to not let it get to 120. Because if you let it get to 120 and you accidentally silence someone, you've wasted your stun on them. You didn't pressure them hardly at all. They'll break free with no problem so quickly. They're not really stunned. There's no animation attached to it. You don't get a lot of damage in. It's just the worst stun ever, and it doesn't affect, like, stamina people might not have to break it at all. So it's the worst stun in the game. I think the correct solution to nerfing Incap would have been to leave the Defile, leave the stun, leave the cost, and reduce the tooltip significantly. Make it so that Incap isn't about hitting a killing blow. You don't want to get killing blows with Incap. It incapacitates people so that it's ridiculously hard to come back from. And it does that by adding the damage, so that when you hit someone, they take 20% more damage from your attacks for 6 seconds. Leave that, make it really hard to heal with a Defile, but make the tooltip really low. Like maybe instead of being an easy 14 to 20k tooltip, maybe it's more in line with something like Surprise Attack, but the follow-up is really strong. Or it allows you to ignore resistance, something that makes it really hard to get away from because it incapacitates you to a certain degree. But just make it so it's not the killing blow every time. I think that would be a much better way to balance it. But as it stands, we have this ridiculous stun that I recommend people not use. Put fear on your bar, use fear, and don't ever let Incap get to 120 ultimate. Just use it and then wait again, right? And then use it like on cooldown at 70 or every time you have a combo up or something. But don't accidentally stun people and then lose your stun on the worst stun in the game. Right? Okay, great. One thing that was kind of fun that they changed to it to make it almost worth having the worst stun in the game is that we now have a passive attached to Incap called Reave. And Reave restores 100 magicka and 100 stamina anytime you deal damage with a light or heavy attack on an enemy with a negative effect. This works great for me because enemies always have negative effects in Cyrodiil, but even in a 1v1, I apply several negative effects. I put poisons on them. I've got poisons on my 2H, so I've got poison injection, poisons on my 2H, any number of negative effects. I think CCs count, so I think while they're feared you can Reave people, but it's really hard to test because I always have poison injection on anyways, and I haven't done it on a dummy yet, so forgive me. My research is limited. But Reave is really interesting in that it gives us an alternate way to recover, which is great because Relentless lost its minor endurance. Holy crap. Guys, check this out. Did you okay. So when I heard that Relentless was losing minor endurance, which is a 10% buff to stamina sustain, I thought, oh, that's too bad, I guess. Minor endurance is very strong, right? Too bad it's going to be gone. But at least we'll get rid of that cursed minor endurance animation. I hate the minor endurance animation. The green cloud around your feet, it just doesn't sync up with the look I like. I love the idea of Relentless because it makes my sword all red and that's so cool, but I hated that green cloud. But oh well, if we're losing minor endurance, at least I'll lose that cloud. No, we still have the minor endurance effect. Look at that. Look at that green cloud. Look at that green cloud around my feet. I look like a Christmas tree. I hate it. I hate it. Why take away minor endurance but keep the minor endurance animation? It looks like I should have minor endurance, but I don't. If you're going to give me this green cloud, at least give me the recovery that comes with it. Or get rid of the cloud. Holy crap, that drives me nuts. Anyway, gosh, I get bugged by the weirdest things, but that seriously bugs me. Take away the animation. It's the only thing I hate about minor endurance, and now that I don't have it, I don't want to have the animation. Okay? Cool. What was I talking about? What was I talking about? Reave. So now that we gain 100 magic and stamina every time we deal damage, how do you take advantage of that? Well, the only real way to take advantage of that is to A, be able to continue to attack people, but more importantly, you need a really high stat pool. So for example, if you have 12k magicka, which is what I ran last patch, you're not going to get a whole lot out of Reave because chances are with the same recovery, you're going to have max magicka a lot more often. If I am running for a bit and using magicka and I'm at 12k, it's going to take me a lot less time to get back to 100. Chances are, when I'm in here using a lot of stamina abilities, there are going to be, if I have 12k stamina or magicka, there are going to be some times that I'm sitting at 100%. With 16k, I can use it more frequently, crutch on it a little harder, be more comfortable with it, and be comfortable knowing that I'm not going to be at 100% magicka all the time because I have so much to use. I can use it on cooldown, I can fear more frequently, and as a result, I can benefit from this Reave passive because I will gain magicka back as I attack. So having a higher stat pool passively increases the usefulness of Reave and allows me to fear more frequently. So now, more than ever, it's totally worth it to just keep beating on someone, get those light attack, Reave procs, fear, do it again, know that I'm recovering because of my light attacks, fear, do it again, and still have enough magicka to cloak away, should I need to. So best way to use Reave is to have high stamina and high magicka pools. So you can see compared to last patch, I actually have about 2k more stamina and like 4 or 5k more magicka. So that's really great. And I've got about the same health. When I started using Tri-Stat food, I realized something. I had a lot of health and a lot of magicka, but just not very much stamina. So I wanted more stamina for the damage and for the Reave, and because it's my main, stat pool. So I bit the bullet and turned my bottom 4 pieces of equipment into max stamina. And now only the top 3 are triglyphs. For those of you who don't know, I used to have triglyphs on pretty much everything, save like 1 piece. So I just put max stam glyphs on 3 more of these and made it worth it. Now what do I do for recovery? My recovery isn't the best in the world, but between Leeching Strikes, which I use, and Reave, the new recovery passive, it's pretty decent. It's also nice because the recent-ish change to races meant that I don't get percentage increases in my recovery as much. I get some from being a Nightblade, but I don't have any from being a Wood Elf. So I don't have to worry about that so much. So I can build flat stats, and I can take advantage of things like siphoning and Reave without feeling bad that I'm missing out on some huge component or part of my build. So that's great. But what do I do? First of all, I am running the Serpent Mundus. Serpent Mundus is kind of my favorite. I tend to build around the idea that I have the Serpent Mundus because it just keeps things consistent and it allows me to switch my sets around without having to go change my Mundus every time I want to try out a different set or play a little differently. I don't have to go back and get a different Mundus. So my unbuffed stam recovery is 1859. And that's not great, but with Reave and Leeching, it's much better. Not only that, but because of my CP, which I'll kind of go through in depth later, I've got more cost reduction than ever because I've taken it out of Befoul, which is no longer useful to me, and I've put it into like break free and rule dodge cost reduction. And I'm going to go into the details of that later. But I guess that's something worth mentioning is that Befoul is now almost a useless star. It's just not nearly as strong. And then on top of that, I don't have a source of Defile at all times. So it's just not worth having anymore, and I put it into cost reduction. So now more than ever, that small amount of stamina recovery gets me a lot further. To compensate for the fact that my food doesn't give me any recovery, I use 1 infused stamina recovery glyph, and more importantly, very interestingly, I am using 1 infused stamina cost reduction glyph. And what's so great about this? It saves you 324 stamina on every stamina ability. That includes roll dodges, bashes, etc. So it used to be that cost reduction was a percentage decrease in cost on jewelry, and that was just never very good for Nightblade because Nightblade abilities just don't cost all that much. So you only wanted to use like cost reduction if you were on a Magicka DK or a Magicka Sorcerer that have just insanely expensive abilities. And it was never worth it to use it on a Nightblade, especially a Stamblade, because stamina abilities tend to cost less than Magicka abilities because you need stamina to run and roll and do physical actions. So it just was never worth it. But now it reduces the cost by a flat amount. And that means that it's going to scale much better with my cheaper abilities. And so what this really means is that if you do just some quick math in your head, if you are in a global cooldown doing a surprise attack and a bash, like let's say you're trying to execute someone. So you're doing a light attack, surprise attack, bash, boop, 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 like this. Boop. Light attack, surprise attack, bash. That is 2 different abilities that are getting a cost reduction of 324. Stamina recovery grants you 255 every other second. So if you were to say, like, the stamina recovery that you're getting per second is going to be a lot closer to 125 from a stamina recovery glyph. But per second on this, you're actually saving around 648, which is significantly better. Like, when you are attacking, you're getting a lot more stamina saved. It's equivalent to 600, well, it's actually equivalent to almost 1200 or so stamina recovery when you're attacking and doing a really, really costly bash. When you are on defense and just like throwing out light attacks, maybe light attack poison injection, that cost reduction isn't doing as much for you. But when you're up here doing this, it's crazy. Other disadvantages of this, and the reason I'm telling you the disadvantages are A, because they're a reality and I'm not going to like just lie, but one of these is super useful. The reason that I don't run more than one, if it's like, okay, well, if this is worth, 1,200 stamina recovery, why are you still running one of these? Like, what's the point at all? Well, the point is that stamina recovery scales a lot better. If you have something like continuous attack going, or you're a Nightblade, for example, you're going to get buffs, percentage buffs to your stam recovery that will not affect cost reduction at all. So for that reason, having high stam recovery means that you can scale it into even higher stam recovery. So it scales better. It's nice to have more of, because as you get these bonuses, minor endurance, continuous attack, being a Nightblade, and that Nightblade passive, stam recovery is worth a little bit more. The other reason is because you're not always attacking. Imagine you had, 80% cost reduction on everything, or maybe not 80%, but let's say you had 1,000 cost reduction on everything, but no recovery. You're still going to run out, and there's nothing you can do to get it back. So recovery is important, because when you are kiting, like let's say you are out of stamina here, you cannot continue to fight, cost reduction is no longer doing anything for you, you're just out of stamina, right? Maybe you've rolled 1 or 2 more times than is necessary, and you're really in trouble. Well, how are you going to get that back? You can heavy attack, but the chances of you getting CC'd are pretty high and unfortunate. So really what a lot of people will do is they'll kite. They'll wait for their stamina to return, and they will try and avoid fighting while that returns. While that is happening, if you are in a recovery or defensive mode, stamina recovery is really important, and cost reduction is nearly useless. It's much, much less effective. So when I'm on defense, I am relying on recovery, and stam cost reduction just doesn't do that much for me. So ideally, in my opinion, 1 is great, 2 is probably too much. You're going to start missing that stam recovery a little bit. On my last one, I do damage, because damage is still great. Damage is good for healing, it's good for scaling up all my attacks. Weapon damage scales a lot better than max stam because of things like continuous attack and even just brutality. Like, brutality buffs your weapon damage, but it does not buff your max stam, obviously. But a lot of people don't think about that. So 1 line of weapon damage is always going to be more damage than 1 line of stam. The thing about the line of stam is that you can actually use it, right? You can consume it and continue. It doesn't just buff your damage and healing. It also allows you to actually perform actions, right? So great. That's sort of the trade-off there. So I want to talk really quickly about the alternate build that I started doing, because I had a few different solutions to these problems that I've brought up, these changes. One of them is my Ophidian Venom build. This is the good old build that I've been running for ages. I love this build because it synergizes really well with both my playstyle and with itself. It's really great. So Ophidian Venom is one of the better sets in the game. It does a lot of damage, and it procs anytime you hit someone that has a poison damage ability on them. Of course, I use Poison Injection for a multitude of reasons. First of all, because it's really strong, and it's a great ranged attack, but just as importantly, I use a Master's Bow, and the Master's Bow gives me an extra 300 weapon damage against targets affected by my Poison Injection. So that's great. So I use that. Poison Injection is always on my targets. At least I try to have it always on my targets. Sometimes it gets cleansed off, whatever. But then I'll just reapply it whenever possible. And so Ophidian Venom is a great set for me. I pair that with Spriggans because weapon damage does not buff the damage of Ophidian Venom, but penetration does. So I use Spriggans. It's a great set. I'll use Spriggans Jewelry, and I'll use a Spriggans Front Bar. One of the reasons that I use Spriggans on the jewelry and weapon instead of on the body is because I really only need that penetration on the front bar, but I like having Ophidian Venom on the back bar. Having penetration on my lower damage bar just doesn't do all that much for me. I don't care for it, but having this proc, it's really nice. I like it. And it means that my Poison Injection spam from a distance is really brutal because I've got a chance of proccing both Ophidian Venom and, of course, my Infused Disease Glyph. I love Infused Disease Glyphs, and I recommend that everyone runs them. Weapon damage is great, but it's so much harder to take advantage of the damage that's given to you by a weapon damage glyph. First of all, again, it will not buff my Ophidian Venom at all, whereas this just delivers straight damage. Weapon damage will scale better, and of course, will buff things like your healing tooltips, which is great, but it's really hard to take advantage of a weapon damage proc. Like, to get the same damage that I get from a disease glyph on a weapon damage proc, you gotta land the weapon damage proc, and then get at least a surprise attack and an incap, maybe another surprise attack, and execute. You gotta do a lot of damage in order to increase your overall damage throughput equal to 4,500. So think, if you had another 450 weapon damage, which is what an infused weapon damage gives you, how much would that increase your actual tooltip? For it to break even across all of the abilities that you land, it would have to increase your tooltips by 4,500. So is 450 weapon damage going to increase your surprise attack by 2,000 and your incap by 2,000? Unlikely. It can, and it can scale with crits, and it can do all sorts of things, but it's very inconsistent. And it also means that every time you land one of these abilities, to take advantage of it, you have to actually, hit them with one of your abilities. Whereas if you're using a disease glyph, you can spam them from range and just do a crazy amount of damage without ever needing to follow up. So it leaves you all of these options and allows you to lay down passive pressure without worrying about whether or not you're going to follow up. And it makes you less predictable, because there are a lot of situations where I'll fight people that I can just stand back and hit them with my light attack poison injection spam and force them to make a choice, because I don't have to follow up. I can pressure them from ranged all I want and do a lot of damage. I don't have to come in with my sword to do anything. I can get quite a lot out of my ranged abilities. It's also great for hitting people that are on horseback or running away from you. It's just really nice. I like it all around. Disease Glyph all the way. For my front bar, I use double dot poisons, which are great. Spriggans is again great because the penetration buffs the damage of Ophidian Venom and all of my other abilities as well. The reason that you would use Nirned is because Nirnhoned increases a percentage weapon damage. Now, of course, this seems opposite to everything else I was saying, but 2H weapons have a really high base damage, so getting another 15% out of them makes a lot of sense. It gives you a pretty fair amount of weapon damage, and the reason that you want that weapon damage is to increase the effectiveness of your rally heal. Your rally heal is a huge burst heal, and in the past, Sharpened and Nirnhoned were very close in damage. Very, very close. And so it just made sense for me to forego the slight added damage from Sharpened and instead get just a huge burst heal anytime I want. Now, it's a lot harder to be defiled, and when you are defiled, Befoul CP isn't scaling it into a nightmare, so you really don't have to worry about having the biggest rally heal ever. And now that we lost Major Fracture from Surprise Attack, the Sharpened is just going to be a lot more damage than the Nirnhoned. So I recommend running a Sharpened Maul, and I'll be doing that as soon as I can transmute one of my existing Mauls. I've got a couple Gold Spriggans Mauls. None of them are Sharpened. I had one that was Sharpened. I transmuted it to Infused to try it out. Now I need to get it back, and I'm not willing to like buy another Maul and gold that out. So I'm just waiting to get transmutes done so I can make it Sharpened again. But run Sharpened. It's going to be all around a much better choice, and it's going to help you do more damage with Ophidian and everything else. So that's great. That is my one build. I came up with an alternate build that plays completely differently. This build here is what I would put into a category that I like to refer to as a low mobility playstyle. The focus is on very high defense, which nowadays we get quite passively through this, and a lot of healing. So my passive healing is going to come through Troll King. Troll King is a lot of healing and is really helpful. Combine that with a pretty steady health pool and relentless focus defense, and you've got a lot going for you. So I can stay in the middle of a fight, be relatively low mobility, and then when I need to, I can use my bow, roll dodge, and sprint away. And then I'm like high mobility. But the idea is that I can sit in a fight for a little bit. I can trade blows with people. I've got damage reduction coming from things like Shuffle and from things like Relentless. So this is a low mobility playstyle. The other build that I've been using is an Eternal Hunt build. So Eternal Hunt is a lot of fun too. And with it, I do a few things differently. First of all, for those of you who don't know, Eternal Hunt means that when you do a roll dodge, you leave behind a rune that detonates. And there are a couple reasons to use this rune. First of all, it has more upfront burst than Ophidian, but it has lower sustain damage because it's really hard to hit these like back to back to back. It's just really not practical. Not only does it take a ton of stamina to do roll dodges, but people, especially after they've been hit by it once, are just very like wary, and so it's not a consistent way to do damage. But it does have a higher tooltip, and it also immobilizes them for almost 2 seconds, a second and a half. This allows for a couple of things. I also use Veladreth. The Veladreth proc is a huge burst, so if you hit both this immobilizing, detonating roll dodge rune and a Veladreth, you've got like, what, a 23k tooltip right there just between your two armor sets. And it slows them down, which means that it's easier to land everything else. And because immobilization is not a breakable stun, they don't have CC immunity, so you can follow it up with a fear and then, you know, execute or do whatever. So that can be a pretty potent combo. Because it builds in 2 lines of stamina recovery, I can go with another infused weapon damage ring. So I'll use the 1 cost reduction and 2 weapon damage because I'm getting recovery from this. And then I switch up my bar a little bit to take advantage of it. Because I'm now running what is called, or what I refer to as a high mobility playstyle, where I can't sit and tank, I'm relying on people walking over runes and jumping in when I have all the right damage stuff lined up. So I have to be able to get in and out of combat. Getting out of combat isn't so hard because I've got these runes from Eternal Hunt. But what do I do about getting into combat? Well, that's where Ambush comes in. Ambush was buffed nicely so that it now afflicts your enemies with minor vulnerability. This is an 8% damage buff against them, so it increases the damage they take, and that will affect Veladreth, it'll affect Eternal Hunt, and it will affect everything else in your lineup. So suddenly Ambush is looking like a good skill. So now I can like light attack, poison inject, jump in, hit them with, you know, the poisons. There's the Veladreth right there, even from range. Roll dodge backwards, hit them with a rune, it can just be very brutal. So that can be a pretty nasty combo. But in exchange, you have to remember that you're giving up the healing of Troll King and also the max health. I tend to run, well, I guess technically I'm running higher health here, but I was switching it around so I could get more stamina and less health. So I'll play with about the same amount of health and then just pump up the stamina in exchange. So that's fine. But this is a really fun build. It's just less flexible because if you encounter someone that burst can't kill, like if you can't kill someone doing this, or like if they're too good where they're just never going to get hit by Veldreth, which can kind of happen from time to time, you're never going to kill them. And in that case, it's really easy to get away from them for the most part because you can just, if you're using a bow and Eternal Hunt, you can just roll dodge, leave the rune behind, and run in a direction, and you will continue to leave runes behind, and it makes it really hard to follow you in a straight line. You run faster than almost everyone else if you're a Wood Elf, because you get another 10% boost to your speed. So even other people that have, major, whatever it's called, major steed, major mobility, holy moly, what's it called? Okay, now I just have to know. Hasty retreat, major expedition. Okay. Even other people that have major expedition, if you're a Wood Elf, are still not going to be able to keep up. Not only because you're leaving behind runes, but because you're going another 10% faster than they are. So it's really nice. So I could disengage from anyone I wanted. And even groups, it's really easy to just like go through a choke point, right? And leave this rune behind and really mess up people. Mess up their whole day. But if I couldn't kill someone, I had to run away from a fight. And I hate running away from fights. That's just not my style. I don't love it. I don't even really enjoy it at all. There's sometimes that you need to run away from a fight because there's like 40 people, and that's great. But I hate running away from like good 1v1s that I could possibly win or at least compete with in a different build. But now, since I can't kill them with my burst, I've got no choice because I'm never going to kill them if I can't kill them with my burst. So I got to run away. I can't pressure or outplay or guess what their sustain is. Or it just makes it a lot harder. Like, there are a lot of things you can do with Eternal Hunt. It makes it way easier to 1v1 other Nightblades. But, like, a hefty DK, it's just really hard. It's just really hard. Same with, like, Templars. And those were already the harder class for me to fight. And not being able to kill them forces me to not fight them. And I don't like that. So, this was a super fun playstyle. But for me, it just wasn't going to be the one that I was going to stick with. But in case you do want to try it, because it is really fun, here's what I changed about my bars. Obviously, I have Ambush. Because I have more straight recovery, I also dropped Siphoning, so no more Leeching Strikes. Now, instead, I move Relentless to the back bar, and this ended up working just fine, because I use Relentless on the back bar, proc it up here while I'm on defense anyways, and then right before I turn to go on offense, I could throw out the Relentless, jump in, hit them with everything, that would explode, you get the execute. It's really effective. It's a super fun combo. Having Relentless on the back worked a lot better than I expected it to. And so, like, just shooting that, jumping in, and then leaving like a rune behind, I really enjoyed it. I think you'll enjoy it too. So I changed my bar setup slightly for that. There, you can also use Reaper's Mark. Reaper's Mark is really strong now. You could use it instead of like Ambush, or I wouldn't use it instead of Fear, but there are a lot of ways you can fit it in. You could take off Siphoning. So like, for example, even if you're using my Ophidian Venom build, you can just take off Siphoning and put on Mark. And then that way, you can just have your enemy marked and you're going to do even more damage. And so that's nice. Having Fracture on people, of course, is really helpful. And when you kill them, you get, just a huge chunk of health. And, of course, Berserk again. So that's not so bad. Right? Not much to complain about. So high mobility, low mobility, kind of a preference. I run, I think, the same glyphs on both sets. Let's see, my Eternal Hunt. Yeah, Stam. Oh, I'm actually running Stam. Am I running Stam on almost all the pieces, but not my chest? And then, of course, yeah, so actually no difference at all. So I'm running Triglyph on the chest, shoulder, and head. So on my Veldreth, you can see I'm also running, Veldreth is heavy. I'm running 2 tri-stats here. I like running at least 2 well fitted. Here I'm running 3 well fitted because I do a lot of jumping around. You could definitely get away with 2 well fitted, but I kind of like 3. It's just helpful in a lot of situations. Roll dodging is one of the strongest defensive mechanics in the game. It allows you to dodge all single target projectiles, so it's just good. I'll use damage, health, poisons on both builds unless I don't feel like crafting them, and I'll just use an infused maul. That works pretty well too. But overall, I think sharpen maul with double dot poisons is going to be best. I think that about covers the sets, the food, the traits, the jewelry. I'm really trying to get another gold Spriggan's ring. When you're running infused, that gold makes a pretty significant difference, but I'm just too poor. So hey, if anyone that's really wealthy wants to send me a gold Spriggan's ring, I'll love you. That would be great. Gosh, begging for stuff. Here's something. I want to talk about potions really quickly. People ask me all the time what potions I use, and I go, shoot, I didn't mention that in my video. So I remember this time. Great. I love Essence of Weapon Crit potions. It's major savagery, so you get that increased weapon critical rating. You get the restore health and then major fortitude, so that increases your health recovery, which of course scales with Troll King. So that's great. And then it restores stamina and gives you major endurance. So another thing that improves the viability of using stamina recovery instead of just cost reduction, right, is getting major endurance from this. So major savagery, health, and stamina. So crit pots, best thing ever. I also keep tripods on hand because I'll use those for when I'm running away. If I'm going to turn on someone or I'm on the offense or anything like that, I'll always use a crit pot. It'll increase my damage and just allow me to continue pressuring at an even higher pace. Crit is a great modifier. It does a ridiculous amount. It doesn't boost Ophidian Venom or any procs, but all of my other attacks can crit, obviously, and so it's great for boosting your overall damage throughput. This is great because it gives you Magicka back, so if you're trying to sneak away from a fight or navigate through a really dangerous Zerg or situation, you can use a tripod to not only give you a boost of Magicka to get away, but also better Magicka recovery, which will allow you to get away for the next, minute or so, the next 47 seconds with an improved recovery. So really great for that. So I keep those on hand as well. I also keep detect pots around. They give me stealth detection and major savagery. Those are really nice, so you get crit and stealth detection. I use those against really sneaky Nightblades that rely too much on cloak. I've got no problem using stealth pots and killing them. People that over rely on one mechanic can't complain if they die to the hard counter to that mechanic. If you don't want to die to detect bots, you have to not rely on stealth completely, which is why things like Mobility, Troll King, etc. There are a huge variety of defensive mechanics. Stealth is really strong, but it should never be your end-all be-all. You should never have a scenario where if you can't stealth, you will die for sure. It happens, of course, but if that's happening regularly, then you're probably over-relying on stealth, and you should try and wean yourself off it if possible. One more thing I want to talk about is my Backbar ulti. This patch I've gone between the two usual suspects. Temporal Guard is really strong. Minor Protection is great as always. The little shield you get while you're blocking as part of the Stygic passive, also really nice. It's just a good all-around ultimate. It's also nice, I actually use the whole reverse time aspect of it too every now and then, and it can really be a lifesaver, especially since I don't run Shade right now. It is sort of like a mini Shade, and that's nice. The other option that I like to run is Werewolf, and I really only run it for that 15% stamina recovery. That's really strong. It really does boost your recovery a lot. You go from 1859 to 2050. So a good 200 stam recovery just for slotting this on your back bar. So I like that. If you don't have either of those, which is a possibility, I think the best thing to do is Soul Siphon, which is sort of like a mini Resto ulti. It's like a poor man's Resto ulti. It gives you a ton of health. It gives you major vitality, and it leeches from your enemies. It's great. Soul Tether is okay as well, but I actually prefer the bigger heal of Soul Siphon most of the time. But use your preference if you want. I'd say 90% of the time I end up just sticking to Temporal Guard. I think it's sort of the most well-rounded. I might change my mind on that. I try and use them all a roughly equal amount, but I have a hard time. I really just think Temporal Guard is really great. I love the shield, and so I use that all the time. Don't hurt me. So that's really great. I wanted to talk about CP changes, but not that much has changed. So what I'm going to do is list my CP in the description so that you can copy it if you want to, or make some adjustments. But the main thing is that I took everything out of Befoul because it doesn't scale nearly as well, and I don't have a way to defile people consistently. So Befoul is just a much less useful star. And I re-siphoned that into Tumbling and into Warlord. So, and also a little bit into Sprinter, which I had none in before. So now my cost reduction on abilities is a lot better, which allows me to run that slightly lower stamina recovery and not just completely run out of stamina all the time, because now Tumbling, like rolling, breaking free, sprinting, whatever, doesn't cost as much. So that's great. I switch these back and forth all the time. I like to keep Mooncalf at 56. These are not great stars, but the key is wind running. Increasing your movement speed and your health and magical recovery while running by 10% is great. It means that like Troll King is buffed, your magical recovery is buffed while you're sprinting, so if you're trying to run away, you're going to be able to cloak faster, so that's great. I switch between these because I feel like I need Magicka more often than I need health recovery, but this health recovery boosts Troll King a ton. So I'd say in general, if you're using Troll King, more likely that I'm going to put 49 in Healthy and 15 in Arcanist. If you're not using Troll King, definitely put the 49 in Arcanist and keep Healthy to 15 or even less, and just find other places to put this. It has to be between these two, of course, if you want wind running, because you need to get 120. So you kind of got to pick your poison there. Does that cover everything? Oh my gosh, it does. So now we're going to go into gameplay, and I'm going to, I guess, show you gameplay. So thanks for watching this far. Okay, so this is an example of low mobility combat. And granted, as you know, saying it's low mobility combat might be a little confusing because we are fairly mobile. I'm very fast. I get major expedition and another 10% movement speed. But the idea of low mobility combat is that you can just kind of stay and take a beating for a little bit. And with my magical warden friend, we are very prepared for this. First of all, we're able to kite really effectively because he can use his whatever vine tentacle thing to jump to where I am. So I'll run off and then he'll grapple to me. And by doing that, we can pull this group into a more reasonable fighting location where they're not surrounded by guards and they have nowhere to retreat to. And during that fight, we can kind of just stand and take their beating. So here we decide to turn on them. We start attacking right away. One is down, and the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we have a reasonable sized group, something that we know that we can fight and win. And then from there, we'll just take the fight to them. We're going to pay special attention to focus the same people, find out when people are vulnerable. We're watching their health, we're watching their healing, and in the meantime, I'm just making sure that I keep my resources high and prepare for a good moment to take someone out. There, one goes down, but you can see the whole idea of this low mobility is that I can just kind of stand in between all four of them, and I'm pretty safe. My health is in a reasonable place. I'm rolling when necessary. I'm healing a lot, and I can just stand here. Troll King makes me really, really sturdy, and of course, New Relentless makes me very sturdy too. So because of that, like that's the idea of the playstyle, is just to hang out in these thick boy groups and not have to worry about dying so much. Being with a Magical Warden helps a lot too, because we can cross heal each other. I mean, being with any duo helps a lot. So I tend to appreciate the low mobility playstyle even more so when I'm playing with someone who is tanky and slow. That way I can stick with them. If I'm playing with a Magic Sorc or another Nightblade, I'll be more willing to go into that high mobility playstyle and play around with that for a little bit. So that's this fight. So I got this fight the other day, and I thought this was really funny. So I'm just going to let this one play out, but the moral of the story here is, if you're in a group, pay attention to your group, and you really should try very hard to be aware of your surroundings at all time, both when you are in a group and when you are solo, maybe even more so when you're solo, but pay attention to your surroundings.
Okay, I hope you're ready for a fight.
These guys aren't. These guys are flagging out, I think. They're not moving. No, they're just not paying attention? I don't know. That guy just Dawnbreakered the ground.
Well, that was easy.
In ESO, most fights are not won because you're dramatically stronger or tankier, or you've got a better build, or even because you're smarter. Most fights are won because you see a mistake that your opponent made and you exploit it. And that could be any number of different things. But the key is patience. You have to live long enough and be ready for the moment when your opponent makes a mistake. And if you do this long enough, it's almost inevitable that you'll win the fight, because eventually they will make a mistake, and if you're ready to capitalize on it, you'll be able to win the fight. This is even more true when you're fighting outnumbered, because communication between different people is never perfect. So eventually, one person will be out of line, they'll overextend, they will make an individual mistake, and because of that mistake, you can punish the entire group by depriving them of one additional member. A lot of times the mistake then to look out for is them trying to resurrect or run away. Anything that you're going to see a temporary lapse of defense. And I want you to pay attention to how that plays out in this fight, because this fight went on for a long, long time against essentially overwhelming odds, where there's no way I was going to defeat all 6 of them with all their cross healing, but then they made a mistake. Hey everyone, if you made it this far, wow, congratulations. This is looking to be like my longest video ever, so I really appreciate you trooping through it. I hope this has helped you a ton. I really put a lot of time and thought into what I'm going to be doing this patch. I hope that you check out my CP in the description if you're looking for that. I'm also going to put my Elsweyr food comparison in the description. It's just a spreadsheet. You can look at it to see what I looked at to decide which food I should go with, how much value each different food option added, the stats that I was getting with each food, and hopefully that'll kind of give you a better idea of why I went with Tri-Stat food, which I'm using all the time and am really enjoying. If you have any, builds that you want to share in the comments, please feel free. I love talking about this stuff. I mean, you'd never guess, right, that I could talk about this for a while. But anyways, I appreciate this whole little community and everyone that contributes. I really do. I hope that everyone joins my Discord and my guild, and please feel free to come play with me. I'm pretty friendly, in spite of my, harrowing, unapproachable, intimidating presence. So come hang out with me. Don't be afraid, I don't bite. What am I saying? Anyways, the Discord is open to everyone, and even if you're brand new, if you've never played the game before, but you're interested in learning more, come talk to me. I'd love to help you get set up. With that, I hope everyone has a great day, and I'll see you in Cyrodiil. Bye.
There's a guy right there. See him on the rock, crouching?
I don't. What are
That guy?
Yeah, he's right here. Look, I'm on him. Look, he's right here. Bash him. Bash him.
Bash him?
Bash him.
Got him.
Dude, imagine his death recap. Bash, bash, bash.
Actually, I got him. Whoa.